All right. So this week we read about the disease called tzaras, and disease for tzaras on the surface comes because of talebearing, talking negatively about another person, and the punishment for this is this miraculous disease that doesn't occur nowadays, where a person's skin is smitten with this change in color and other maladies. And we know the sin of speaking negatively of others, lashon hara, is a big one. It says that sin is equal to all three of the cardinal sins that are it's better to give your life rather than do them. Idolatry, adultery, and murder. Says that those sins altogether are tantamount to lashon hara, speaking negatively to others, is equal to all three of them put together. So it's a big one, and Maimonides says that it's considered like denying Hashem completely. The Torah is very not a mild punishment in the least. The guy is sent outside all the camps, and yet, more the Torah says that a mitzora, someone who has this disease, is like he's dead. And yet the Torah uses a word that tells us that this man is actually quite the gentleman, quite not the gentleman, quite the perfect person. There are four titles for man in the Torah. There's Adam, Ish, Enish, and Gever. They all mean man. What's unique about Adam is that Adam means the perfect man. Man in his greatest, his highest level, what he's meant to be. How come the Torah describes the Mitzorah as an Adam when it seems he is far from it? Why is he receive that title? Why is he considered that why is he considered to have this greatness? So to understand this, well, we have to go a little bit deeper to understand the appellation Torah gives to him, calling him an other. Let's start with this. The Torah says that there are different kinds of tzaras, different kinds of change of skin color. And the Torah goes on to discuss where the tzaras occurs in the body. It could happen to the head, it could happen to the beard. And Rashi says that the Torah uses a different word for the tzaras in the head, not because it is actually different, but because of the location of where it is. When the tzaras happens in the head, Rashi says, then it's called nesek. It's called, when it happens, the other part of the body, it's called nega. But not because it's actually different, it's just where in the body it takes place. On the other, Maimonides says that nesek means that when the tzaras occurs in the head, it's not the same kind of thing. The tzaras in the body is the skin changing color, but the tzaras in the head, Maimonides says, is a different thing. It's where the hair comes out, the hair, the beard, the hair that comes out. It's a different kind of thing. So the difference between Maimonides and Rashi about why we're either calling it a different name because of the location of where it is, or because it is a different kind of disease when it happens in the head, has to do with the way they define the cause for the tzaras. Rashi says the punishment of tzaras is for lashon hara, speak negatively of others, and for arrogance, and that's why this disease occurs in different parts of the body. The lashon hara has two components to it. On the one hand, lashon hara has to do with jealousy, hatred, negative character. because I hate, because I am jealous, therefore I am tempted to ridicule someone else and to talk about their iniquity to another person. That's one element of Lashon Hara. But there's a second element, really. Lashon Hara is not only when you are driven by hatred, Lashon Hara can also itself bring you down. For example, as we discussed last night about Miriam, she she cared very much about Moshe Rabbeinu. She raised him, she loved him. And when she spoke negatively about him, Moshe wasn't upset at her. And she did this for the sake of heaven. She thought that she was doing a mitzvah by speaking negatively about Moshe Rabbeinu. And yet she was smitten with this disease. That tells us that the speech itself of Lashon Hara, even if it's altruistic, can bring you down. It's not that the Lashon Hara is always because of bad feelings, because of negative character. It's more like the speech itself brings you somewhere. Let's unpack that for a sec. There are our soul powers, there's our intellect, there's our emotions, and then there is our expression of our soul powers, our thought, speech, and action, our words that we think in our mind. Not the content of what's in our thoughts, but the content of our thoughts has to do with our intellect and emotions. Then there are the words we have in our mind, there are the words we say, there are the actions that we do. Those three garments of the soul, thought, speech, and action, are expressions of our intellect and emotions. But in those three itself, there's a difference between speech and thought. Thought is called a garment of the soul, like speech, but it's different to speech. You could change your clothing. You could take off the garments you're wearing, put on different garments. They're not attached to you. Unlike the letters of thought that are in your mind, you can't stop thinking. You could decide to think about other things. You can't stop thinking. Your thoughts are an echo of what's going on inside your soul. Your soul's function, intellect, and emotions is expressed in where your thoughts go. You could direct them, yes, but the natural flow of thought comes from what's going on in your intellect and emotions. And you can't stop thinking, you can't turn it off. On the other hand, speech is called levush hanifah. It's a garment for the soul, but it's a separate garment. It's not attached to the soul. You could decide to stop speaking. You could decide to speak about things that have nothing to do with how you're actually, what your opinion really is. Speech doesn't necessarily flow from your intellect and emotions. On the other hand, Chassidus says, speech is rooted in the very essence of the soul. The words that we choose to say come from the very essence of the soul. And that's why there is such a, Torah cares so much, Hashem cares so much about the words that we say, because the words that we say affect that very essence of the soul. So those are the two components in our speech. There is speech being an expression of our intellect and feelings, and there is speech affecting the essence of the soul, speech being rooted beyond our consciousness, speech being rooted in very core of who we are. So when we talk about Lashon Hara, there's two elements there. The Rambam talks about in the laws of Deis, chapter 7, he talks about how we speak negatively of others, you're damaging another person, it's hurting another person. It's a bad thing to man and man to speak negatively of others. But the Rambam also talks about in the laws of Tzaras. He says, what is Tzaras? Where does it come from? His people are speaking idle chatter. Because they're speaking idle chatter, they end up speaking about the righteous, tzaddikim. They start speaking negatively about them. And eventually they start speaking about God. So the Rambam uses the expression that they sit on the ground, but their tongue goes in the sky. They're talking negatively about God. Where does it start from? Because they begins talking about all kinds of things in the world, just unimportant things, and that leads them downwards. So my mind is clearly in the laws of Tzaras is not talking about bad character. I'm talking about just people are just not careful about their speech. The focus is the speech. The speech itself draws them to ridicule the tzaddik. The negative speech itself. So that's why the Torah describes the Mitzorah as an Adam, as a perfect person, because we're not talking about somebody who has necessarily a character flaw of hatred and arrogance and jealousy, but he's not perfected what's going on out in his more external, superficial parts of himself. He's not careful about what he's saying, and that itself brings him down. This negatzeras, this disease, is meant to correct it. It's not that that he is arrogant. It's not that he is so terrible inside. It's more like he's not conscious of where he needs to be on the outside. He's not conscious of the words that he's saying. That's bringing him down. That's what the Torah says. The way to correct the tzeras is with birds. Why birds? Because birds chirp a lot. So the issue isn't that he has necessarily arrogance. It's just he's chirping a lot. He's talking a lot. Just like Miriam. Miriam was the perfect tzaddikus, and yet the punishment wasn't because she had a character flaw. It wasn't that she was anything other than perfect inside, but nevertheless she got tzeras because of something external. And that's what Alter Rebbe talks about, how tzeras does not occur nowadays because we don't have this perfection within. Tzeras is specifically where someone who has reached this state of perfection within, and therefore he needs only to cleanse himself of something that's going on in the more external parts of himself. Because it's not only externally, you speak negatively, that actually affects who you are. It actually affects the essence of your soul. The speech brings you down. So now let's go back to the two descriptions of tzeras of the head. Rashi, who says it's just another part of the body, and the Rambam, Maimonides, who says it's a different kind of disease. The disease is something else, not the regular tzeras. It's where the hair comes out. Rashi actually mentions two causes for tzeras. He says it's not only tail-bearing, it's also arrogance. And these two titles correspond to the two kinds of diseases. There is speaking negatively. That's something which affects the skin of the rest of the body. It's an external thing. You're talking negatively, so it affects the skin on the rest of the body. But arrogance, which is more of a subtle kind of deeper kind of a problem, that already affects that's the tzeras that affects the head. Rashi says there are two causes for tzeras. There is the words that you say, and there is the arrogance. So since arrogance is something which is more subtle, more sophisticated, pronounced problem, therefore it occurs in different part of the body, occurs in deep in a higher organ of the body, occurs in the head. Randall Futterfass said that, how do you define arrogance? Randall said there's three kinds of people walking into a shul. One guy walks into the shul and he says that he wants an aliyah. And sometimes someone walks to the shul and he says, if I don't get my aliyah, I'm not coming back here. Is that a good thing? That's arrogance, right? Arrogance. It could be arrogance. He's too full of himself. He says, I should get the aliyah. But remember, so when he was a child, he asked this old chassid about arrogance. The old chassid said, the guy walks to the shul and he's demanding the aliyah and he's fighting, how come he didn't get an aliyah? Still okay. Still okay. Not the worst. The worst is when someone's silent to himself, says to themselves, they should have known. They should have known. That's a more sophisticated, subtle problem. So that's why tzeras happens to the rest of the body, because of shahara, and tzeras happens to the head when there is this inner problem when the person is too full of himself. Maimonides, on the other hand, does not mention arrogance as a cause for this disease. The Rambam says people talk empty words and end up ridiculing the righteous and end up ridiculing the prophets and end up denying Hashem completely. According to the Rambam, the two diseases on the skin or on the head correspond to two stages in the same problem. There is where you're just talking about making fun of things, making fun of people, And then there is what that leads you to. It ends up causing you to deny Hashem. So when a disease is just external, where it's just in your words only, so then it's a disease of the skin. But when it brings you to deny Hashem completely, then the tziras comes in the head. And that's why the Rambam considers them to be two completely different kinds of diseases, because there is a symmetry between man and man. That's what you're starting with. But denying Hashem is incomparably worse. Now this has led you to a far worse state of affairs. It's a whole different category. That's why the Rambam counts this as the Rambam classifies this as a different category of disease. It's a bigger subject than we're going to get to today, but the Alter Rebbe, he doesn't just describe a person as being on a higher level. I guess it's disease. Alter Rebbe says that the actual disease itself are lofty lights of Hashem that are so lofty, so great, so intense that they have no vessels to be expressed in a positive way in this world. It's like they say about people with various kinds of emotional diseases that sometimes people express themselves being very apathetic, not because they're actually apathetic. It's because they are so in touch with other people that they become so closed within themselves because they aren't able to see the same kind of intense love in other people. They really care deeply, but they are unable to get that same kind of reaction in others, and that leads them to become closed up within themselves. So in a similar way, this disease actually is a great intense light of Hashem, but it comes down to the world in the way of a disease. The Rebbe says that Mashiach is also called a Messiah. Mashiach is given that title because Mashiach brings this incredible light of Hashem to the world that's beyond the world. So the question is, what do you do when you reach that stage of perfection? You reach the level of Mashiach. The world's ready for Mashiach, but he hasn't actually come. These lights are ready to come down to the world. They're not yet. There's no vessel for them. So it says in Ethics of Our Fathers that we're going to read this week, chapter 2. Rabbi Yomer, Rabbi says, what's the path that man should choose in life? Should choose a path in life, says Rabbi, that's beautiful, that he considers to be beautiful, and others consider beautiful. So the Rebbe said this question of Rebbe is also a question that's pertinent to the time we're in right now, the time that's right becoming Mashiach. We're about to enter the time of Mashiach. We're, so to speak, like the Metzora who's perfect on the inside, just has to get that last bit on the outside to come down to the world. So the answer is Tiferes. Tiferes says in the Talmud, when we say in our prayers, Hashem has greatness, Hashem has beauty. So the Talmud says greatness refers to creation, Tiferes, beauty refers to giving the Torah. The Torah is called beauty. So by studying Torah, Rebbe says, specifically about Mashiach, that's what is, if all the paths in the Torah, every mitzvah does something. Every time we learn Torah does something. Every prayer does something. We were discussing yesterday and on Shabbos. But uniquely, there's a special power in studying Torah about Mashiach to actually reveal Mashiach and the world, actually bring Mashiach, make those higher lights the vessel in the world. Key is to study Torah about Mashiach and actually make it happen. All right. Are there any questions or comments? A great day, Rebero. Great day, Chaim Peretz. Great day, David.